I had $20,000 in my bank account when I quit my job at 53. Not enough to retire, not enough to feel safe, barely enough to last 6 months if I was careful. And I walked away anyway. No backup plan, no safety net, no idea what I was doing. People thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But staying one more day felt like dying in slow motion, and I just couldn't do it anymore. This is what happened next. There was no dramatic exit, no middle finger to my boss, no inspirational speech in the parking lot. I just packed my desk, same as I'd done 1,000 times before on regular nights, except my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear exactly, from something weirder. I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision that felt true. Everything was calculated, safe, acceptable, and somewhere in all that safety, I'd disappeared. Here's what nobody tells you about corporate life. You can lose yourself one yes at a time, one compromise, one I'll deal with it later. Until one day you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's idea of success. Everyone thinks people quit because they want freedom. That's not it. I quit because staying had become a betrayal I told myself every single morning. And the lies were getting harder to swallow. But it wasn't a crisis that broke me. The question that destroyed everything wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I walked past the same window I'd passed for years, caught my reflection, and didn't recognize the person looking back. Not just the face, the posture, the way my shoulders carried weight that wasn't even real. I thought, is this it? Is this how I'm spending my life? And before I could stop it, another thought slipped through. If I'm lucky enough to retire someday, will I look back and say this was worth it? Or will I just remember surviving? That second question is the one that haunts you, because suddenly you realize you've been postponing everything. Work now, rest later, live later, be happy later, later. Except you're 53, and later is running out. I'd done everything right, followed every rule. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? I had checked every box society hands you. Steady career, check. Reliable income, check. Benefits, check. Respect from people who didn't actually know me, check. For years, it worked. The money was good enough to silence the questions. The routine gave me something to hide behind. When someone asked what I did, I had an answer that sounded impressive. But somewhere along the way, so quietly I didn't notice, the job stopped being something I did and became something I endured. I started measuring my life in weekends, counting days until vacation like a prisoner marking walls. Sunday evenings came with this feeling in my chest, this low-grade dread I learned to ignore because everyone else seemed fine with it too. We all just accepted it, like that's what being an adult means. But my body knew something I kept refusing to admit. What scared me wasn't the idea of leaving. It was realizing I'd become someone who no longer noticed how miserable he was. My body figured it out first. Sleep stopped working. I'd collapse into bed exhausted and wake up more tired. My brain wouldn't shut off, replaying conversations that didn't matter, stressing about schedules that weren't even important. Little health warnings started popping up, things I told myself were just normal for my age. Everyone's tired at 50, everyone's stressed. That's just life, right? Except there's a difference between aging and eroding, and I was eroding. The day I finally said it out loud, something changed. When I finally said the words, "I'm done," they came out calm, too calm. No anger, no breakdown, just certainty. I didn't have a plan. That's what freaked everyone out. "What are you going to do?" they kept asking, like the absence of an answer meant I'd failed some test. The truth, I had no idea. I just knew my time had started to feel more valuable than my paycheck, and that terrified me enough to listen. Walking away with $20,000 wasn't brave. It was uncomfortable as hell. It showed me how much of my confidence was borrowed from a salary, how much of my identity depended on being busy in ways other people approved of. But as scary as it was, it felt clean, like stepping out of a room that had been filling with smoke while I kept telling myself I could still breathe. I didn't quit because I had it figured out. I quit because I finally understood that waiting for certainty was just another way of staying stuck, and staying was costing me something I could never earn back. The first weeks weren't some peaceful awakening. They were brutal, quiet in a way that felt exposed, like when the music stops at a party and you realize how loud you'd been talking. I woke up early out of habit, my body still programmed for alarms that didn't exist anymore. For a few seconds every morning I'd panic. Where am I supposed to be? Then I'd remember, nowhere. And that freedom felt less like relief and more like falling. When you've spent decades being told where to stand and what to do, having nobody tell you anything feels like a threat. But the scariest part, money suddenly became very, very real. When you're employed, money feels abstract, theoretical, like something that just appears as long as you keep showing up. When you step away, it becomes physical. Every purchase has weight now. I'd stand in stores holding things I didn't need, embarrassed by how automatic buying had become. How easily I'd traded hours of my life for stuff I barely remembered owning. I wasn't poor, but I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years. And clarity? Clarity has sharp edges. But something unexpected started happening. Once the job disappeared, this space opened up. Not just time, mental space. Room to notice how my body actually felt. Not just whether it could function enough to get through another day. I started sleeping longer. Not deeper at first, just longer. Like my system was catching up on years of debt. I noticed how much I'd been rushing for absolutely no reason. Rushing to eat, rushing to drive, rushing through conversations because something else always felt more urgent. Without deadlines pressing in, I saw it clearly. I'd been living in a constant state of low-grade panic for years. But fear didn't just vanish, it shapeshifted. I stopped fearing Mondays. Started fearing running out of money, running out of ideas, running out of the version of myself that believed this was right. Some days I questioned everything. Stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd confused exhaustion with wisdom. That's the part people don't talk about. When you step off the path, doubt doesn't stay behind. It walks right next to you, asking questions you can't answer yet. But here's what else happened. Something quieter, something that changed everything. My nervous system started to settle in ways I didn't know were possible. That constant tension in my chest, it softened. My thoughts slowed down enough to actually finish themselves. I started walking, not for exercise, just to remember I was still part of the world. And I noticed things, seasons, sounds, birds, wind moving through trees, stuff I used to dismiss as background noise when my life was happening somewhere else. I didn't become fearless or enlightened, I became present. And presence is uncomfortable because it removes all the distractions you've been using to avoid yourself. Without work absorbing everything, old questions resurfaced. What actually matters to me? How little do I really need? Who am I when I'm not performing competence for someone else? You don't answer those quickly. And they don't come with guarantees. But for the first time in years, I was asking the right questions. The strangest part, my value didn't vanish with my job. The world didn't collapse. People still smiled at me. The sun still came up. Life kept happening. My identity had been wrapped so tight around productivity that I'd forgotten I existed before it. Letting that unravel was uncomfortable, humbling, deeply necessary. I wasn't trading my days for approval anymore. I was learning, slowly, imperfectly, how to actually inhabit them. I didn't feel successful, but for the first time in forever, I felt aligned. And that felt like the beginning of something, even if I couldn't name it yet. What got me through the next months wasn't some breakthrough or hidden talent. It was something way less impressive. I started paying attention to how I spent my days. Not the big plans, not the 5-year outlook, just the hours in front of me. When you've lived rushing your whole life, stillness feels suspicious. I had to relearn how to move slowly without guilt. Mornings didn't need to be conquered anymore. They could just be entered. I stopped asking what the day was worth and started asking if I could be present inside it. That didn't make me rich, but it made me steady. I also realized something painful. So much of my old life had been structured around avoidance, avoiding discomfort, avoiding silence, avoiding the quiet voice that asked hard questions late at night. Without the job drowning it out, that voice got louder, but it also got clearer. It showed me how badly I'd neglected my health while calling it discipline, how many meals I'd eaten on autopilot, how many evenings I'd numbed with distraction because I was too tired to feel. I didn't fix everything overnight. I just started treating my body like it mattered, because it did. Sleep became something I protected instead of sacrificed. Movement became daily, not heroic. Walks, not punishment. Consistency, not perfection. And slowly, almost without noticing, I started feeling like myself again. But money forced a different kind of honesty. I had to confront what I actually needed versus what I was used to. That was harder than I expected. Letting go of habits, subscriptions, small luxuries that once felt essential showed me how much of my spending had been emotional. I wasn't buying joy, I was buying relief. Once that stopped, my life got quieter and weirdly richer. Having less demanded more creativity, more awareness, more intention. I learned how resourceful I could be when fear stopped paralyzing me and started informing me. There were moments I missed the old life. I won't lie. Sometimes I miss the certainty of a salary. Certainty is seductive, but certainty also demands obedience, and I'd given enough of that already. What I got instead was something I didn't know how to value before: autonomy over my time. Days where I could think, learn, fail quietly, and try again without an audience. That space let parts of me wake back up. Curiosity, patience, a sense of play I'd buried under seriousness. I wasn't just recovering from burnout. I was rediscovering who I was before I learned to measure myself only by output. At 53, I understood something that would have terrified me at 30. I've already lived more years than I have left. That realization can either shrink you or sharpen you. For me, it sharpened everything, made excuses harder to tolerate, made waiting feel dangerous, made me less interested in impressing anyone and more interested in being honest. I stopped asking for permission, internally and externally, to live differently. That was the real shift, not quitting the job, quitting the belief that change required approval. I'm not telling you this to convince you to do what I did. Everyone's life has its own weight, its own responsibilities. But I'm telling you it's possible to step off a path even when you don't have it all figured out. I didn't quit because I was fearless. I quit because fear was already running my life, and I wanted it to stop. I'm not finished. Still adjusting, still learning, still uncertain sometimes. But I wake up now with something I hadn't felt in years, alignment. And that's worth more than comfort.